I don't know if you've heard this quote. It's by Irenaeus. He's the great second century theologian.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, "The glory of God is man fully alive."
Mm,
And it kind of ties in with what Jesus said. Jesus said, "I
mm.
have come that they may have life and life more abundantly," right? And so God's glory manifested in someone's life actually has the propensity, and what it does is it actually animates someone to where they have life and life more abundantly. And I'm thinking like that's what I'm aiming for. Like
Amen.
everything in my life is from a God perspective, I'm trying to glorify God.
Yeah.
From a man's perspective is I want you to feel fully alive.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for once again joining us on Art of the Assistant. I am here again. I say good friend, and Jonathan and I have been friends for years, and this is our first face-to-face. We've been following each other on social media, and our posts are very much alike. We enjoy each other's posts. And I'm just thankful to have him on here today. I told the boys I'm very excited, my boys, because after today, I know my fitness regimen is going to drastically change, man. We're getting in shape, and Jonathan's going to help us do that as we dive into really the importance of mental health in conjunction with our physical health and how that ties into our spiritual well-being and even our ministry. And Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for coming on the podcast with us today, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We were talking before the podcast, those are listening, like, where did we meet? And have we met in person? The social media space is so crazy because you're like, I know this person. I've seen their post.
Right.
There's so much synergy and energy, and we've both felt that. So thank you for having me on. I'm excited about our conversation.
No, it's awesome, man. Yeah, I love it. And again, I appreciate you and just your the different videos you've done, from apologetics, church planning to now with mind and body, and how you're working and inspiring us, telling us how to do our chest workouts or our shoulder workouts. And
Right.
I love all that. And I think that's all so important. And so, Jonathan, what I want to do today is I want to dive in. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and just if you want to start back when, the Lord led you into church planning, when you went out to Seattle. And I think that in and of itself is a story, I know, and not easy. And then how God has brought you from the West down to Atlanta. And then I'll just dive in a little bit of that as you tell your story and go from there.
Yeah. So going back when we were talking a little bit before, after I finished college and I studied like theology and evangelism and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I launched into itinerant evangelistic ministry. My wife and I traveled. It was like an extended honeymoon in some ways. We just had so much fun traveling around, being with God's people, preaching and teaching the word, and just seeing the gospel, do its thing and work in people's lives and seeing good spiritual formation. During that time, though, I began to get an angst for like wanting to see the gospel take root in a city. And I was reading a book by Timothy Keller. I'm sure you're familiar with Tim Keller.
Yep, absolutely.
Who isn't? He's just tremendous pastor and author.
Yeah.
He wrote a book. It's called Center Church.
Center Church. Yeah. I figured.
Have you read it?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
amazing. Yeah. It made me want to go move to a city.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly what it did. Like I knew I wanted to see spiritual formation happen in the context of a church rather than just going around and preaching and teaching. And then I read that book. It's like, I want to do this in a city. I just think this makes sense. There's so many image bearers in a city. There's so much potential for kingdom impact.
A little more than West Virginia.
Yeah, just a little bit. But so that really convinced me. It's like, I really feel like we need to be moving this direction.
Awesome.
So 2015, we did a survey trip out to Seattle. And which is interesting, before we went to Seattle, we went to New York City. And my wife did not grow up in the city. And she was like, when we went to New York, and it was really overwhelming. Actually, to both of us in some ways, just traffic was horrendous. Yeah. And she was like, I like this idea of a city and planning a church, but I hope Seattle's better. And when we went out to Seattle, this is partially probably because the Lord was directing us this way, but we just fell in love with the city. It is a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Let me pause. Have you ever been?
I've never been to Seattle.
My brother, You got
Never
to
been to Seattle.
get outside the
No.
borders of West Virginia.
No. I
um,
know. I
but
know. I've never, farthest west I've honestly been is Denver. I've never been farther than Denver.
okay, but Denver is
Yep.
beautiful. That's
Yeah,
it.
Denver's beautiful. Yeah. But no,
But
I
yeah,
need
we
to get
got
to
it.
Seattle.
Yeah, we got out to Seattle and 2015. And then we
Okay.
realized like, okay, we're gonna have to, change gears, raise support, and all that kind of stuff. And once that was in place, we had like 2 years of we did some pastoral work and raising some support. Went out
Hmm.
to Seattle at basically in 2018 is when we got out there,
Okay. Okay.
and it was so fun. Built a
Wow.
team, went out there,
Wow.
started building
That's
some great
awesome.
momentum, and we launched the church in 2019.
Okay. What did
And
you call it? What was the name? What was the name of the church?
City Light Church.
City Light Church. Okay. Okay.
And it was fun. I mean, obviously, City Light or Seattle is a very kind of a post-Christian culture. You might
Yeah.
even say, in some sense, that there really hasn't been a pervasive movement of the gospel there. Some people call it a
Right.
pre-Christian
Wow.
setting, just because there just hasn't been. Even though if
Yeah.
you study some of the founding of Seattle, there were some really good like Christian people
Hmm.
involved in the founding of
Yeah.
the city. But anyways, the I really enjoyed being around people that really quickly said, "Yeah, I don't believe in God."
Hmm. Hmm.
When you're in the South, like I did most of my evangelism and ministry in the South. I
Yeah.
grew up in the South,
Yeah.
and a lot of times the conversation is like, everyone's a believer.
Yeah.
Jesus is my
Yeah.
good friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you kind of have to convince them like what the gospel actually is and
Yeah,
what.
I tell people the story all the time. I was at Bob Jones and we went out downtown Greenville to do street evangelism. And I'm like, I had guys that were drunk holding a bottle. They gave the gospel back to me better than I could give it to them.
Hmm.
Just, they just know it.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. Um, they know the rhetoric.
Yes.
They know how to
Yes. Yes.
articulate it.
Yep.
In the Seattle context, it's very much agnostic, somebody that's agnostic, or
Yeah.
maybe as far as being like atheist, that's pretty
Wow.
common.
Okay.
But they've moved past I mean, there's some angry
Mhm.
atheists for sure, but typically they've moved past the angry stage,
Yeah.
and they're more willing to have conversation, and they asked great questions,
That's awesome.
and
Yeah.
it was really good. It was a good time. I really enjoyed my time
That's
there.
awesome. So you're there at 2018, the church is getting rolling, which again, I think it's amazing. Even here where I am, I'm in a college town. Man, when people get saved out of that context, they get saved. And you know it, and you see life change, and there's nothing like that. But
Right.
you're rolling with this, Jonathan, and I'm writing down the dates here. 2015, you do all this work, you get launched in 2018. And West Virginia was one thing, but Seattle, when you hit 2020, March 2020, your world had to turn upside down.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was wild. COVID, especially in Seattle, and I'm
Yeah.
not criticizing the way they went about it, but they were probably strict more than most states when it
Right.
comes to
Right.
gatherings and trying to just promote safety. And I think all of us, regardless of where you fall on that, like whether what was
Right.
the origin and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, it's kind of like we were all kind of hit like, okay, we just need to figure what's happening out.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a story for those who are listening in, prior to COVID, my wife and I had our second son who was born with some medical complexity.
Mm.
It's best label for it's golden heart syndrome. He was born with one eye, one ear,
Wow.
and his upper airway hadn't been fully developed, so he had a trach to
Wow.
breathe. And
And that was before 2020?
yeah, yeah. So he was actually born before we went to Seattle.
Oh, really? Okay.
And
Okay.
so crazy story too was like when we were getting ready to go, it was like several months out before we were going to move. Actually, probably about 9 months out before we were going to move to Seattle. We learned that William was going to be born with
Mm.
some medical complexity, and
Mm.
we're like, should we move into church planning? Is this
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
decision? And honestly, we're just like, we need to move in a direction that has the best wisdom reflecting in the decision. And
Yeah.
we're praying about this.
Yeah.
Um, and every time we brought it up to like the medical people we were in different areas, but like in South Carolina, they were like, "Oh, you're going to move to Seattle? There's a world-class children's
That's
hospital
awesome.
in
That's awesome.
Seattle."
Yeah.
And so we're just like, "Oh, well, hey, this really seems like a God
Yeah.
thing here,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?" So we're like, "Let's just keep going. Let's
Yeah.
move across. Let's trust God and everything." And right before we moved, William got drastically sick.
Mm.
Like we were really concerned for him,
Yeah.
and he was in the hospital for a while. And we're like, we're supposed to like be flying out. We've already moved all of our stuff out of our apartment. We were basically
Wow.
homeless. We're like
Wow.
moving, but we've been in the hospital. He was getting better, but they said, "Hey, listen, it's going to be months before he could fly commercial, and he probably shouldn't because
Mm.
you know how the oxygen
Oh yeah.
level changes, and it could be a life-threatening
Wow.
scenario." And we also didn't want to drive across the country because you can be hours away from any type of hospital
Right.
in an
Right.
emergency. So they're like, "You're going to need a medical flight." And to kind of cut the story from making it too long, um, basically we're like, "Okay, so how do we get that flight?" And they're like, "Well, your insurance probably could cover it if it was in the state, but we're not going to cover it going across the United
Mm.
States." So it was going to be $30,000-$40,000
Mm.
for us to fly across the state. And we're like, "Oh, well, we don't have that chunk of change
Yeah.
laying
Yeah.
around."
Yeah.
And so we just decided, like a nurse actually came up to us and said, "You should just like start a campaign or something and
Mm.
label it like Wings for William." That's
Okay.
what she
Yeah.
came up with.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
just stuck with us. We're like, hashtag
Yeah.
Wings for William.
Yeah.
And so we just started saying, "Hey, everybody, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get
Yeah.
Seattle. We
Yeah.
need help." And we raised through that really short time. It was like less than 2 weeks. We raised just shy of $20,000.
Praise the Lord.
And I was thinking, well, 20 is not 40.
Yeah.
Still need more. And then a
Yeah.
flight company that I think is owned by Christian people just heard our story,
Okay.
and they ended up having. They just said, "Hey, whatever money you have, we'll fly you."
Awesome.
And that was
Awesome.
just a
Thanks,
crazy story. But
man.
that's just a way that one thing that we say in the Beazley home is just like, life has a lot of curbs to it. It's hard, it's
Yeah.
difficult, but you can look at it as just threatening, or you could look at it as, "Hey, this is an adventure. This is
Yeah.
a fun." I mean, any movie that you watch, you don't want it to be boring. You want there
Right.
to be
Yeah.
interest and, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
difficulty and
Yeah.
overcoming. And I was like, "Hey, this is a part of our story, part of
Amen.
the adventure." And that was a crazy ride for us to get
Awesome.
out to Seattle, but
Awesome.
we made it. And
Yeah.
then to tie it into what you were saying with COVID, we with the medical complexity plus COVID, we tried to really continue with that church plant, and
Hmm.
we basically pushed a year into it. And we're thinking about replanting the church or relaunching the church after COVID, but a bunch of my coaches were just like, this might be a good time because we were in the hospital quite a bit
Yeah.
once we got to Seattle, and it was difficult. So we decided to take a step back from planting. And I don't think I told you this actually, but we are planning to move back to Seattle.
Okay.
I don't know if I told you that beforehand, but
No.
we're looking to move back there. We really love the city, felt compelled to be
Praise the
there,
Lord.
and
Yeah.
so
That's great. So let me time out there, Jonathan, as we're talking, because these guys are listening. They know transition. Many of them are praying, as you know, when you're 23, 24, 30, God, where do you have me to go? What's next? And so that was 2020. You guys kind of stepped away a little bit, and we'll get into the story how God led you where you are. But ministry doesn't stop, right? I mean, even the heart and the desires that God gave you, it sounds like you still have those for Seattle, to the people. Is that a true statement?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that's awesome that you're doing that. So now you've told us the end of the story. You want to go back. So you left Seattle, then what? Where did you go? Where did you land?
Yeah, so there's a lot of details that I could add here, but basically we moved we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. There were some opportunities that ended up falling through.
Mhm.
And when I was in church planning, I started an apologetic ministry. So
Okay.
I was involved in that.
Yeah.
And I was kind of debating whether or not, hey, could I do this full time?
Yeah.
And that ministry is still moving. I'm not actively involved in it
Yeah.
currently,
Yeah.
but but there was a series of pivots that I needed to take. Like, so
Mhm.
once I stopped church planning, naturally your support drops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Churches are out, giving money
Absolutely.
towards the plant. So we
Right.
had to pivot, and that was hard because my whole life prior to that, after college, was ministry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was just like, I mean, I felt like I had, you know, I'm a capable person. I have some pretty decent skills, but I'm like,
Mhm.
what do I do? All I knew was
Right.
ministry, so it was a
Right.
difficult thing to pivot from. But we started trying to find different opportunities. I did look for other pastoral ministries too, because I thought maybe like an established church might be a better fit
Yeah.
than trying to start a brand new one with everything that
Right.
was going on. We just didn't feel like that was the right thing. So one thing that I was committed to was like, if the verse in scripture where it says, "Ask and it shall be given to you; seek and you shall find; knock and the door shall be opened to
Yeah.
you." Now I'm going to tell you my view. You can, interject if you feel like I'm off on this for sure. I used to think that those phrases, "ask, seek, and knock," were all just kind of picturesque of all the same action: ask,
Yeah.
seek, knock,
Okay. Yeah.
and they were all directed towards God.
Yeah.
But I actually have come to view that verse a little bit differently, and I think it fits in the overarching context that Jesus was stating it in. Um, Ask is really directed towards God, but
Mhm.
seeking and knocking is now the act of faith that follows, believing, since I ask God, He's going to answer.
Yeah.
He's going to open something. But here's what happens with a lot of young guys or people in general: we ask God for something and then we don't act,
Yeah.
and we're waiting for God to open the door. And sometimes, as you know, you get put into a position where all you can do is wait. That happens.
Yeah.
But more times than not, there is a way that you can move. And I
Right.
think, so my conviction is I certainly communicate to God. I ask God, I ask for his wisdom. I ask for him to open up doors. And now I'm going to seek, I'm going to knock, I'm going to look for those opportunities, because that's the steps of faith. And you know this. I don't know if you ever read the book. It's not written by a Christian, but it's Who Not How. Have you ever read this book?
I haven't read that, huh?
Oh, you ought to get it. It's so
I'll have to
good.
do it.
But basically, the book, and I'll clarify to make sure I had the title right later. But basically, the book is saying, oftentimes when we can't figure out something, we say, okay, how do I figure this out? We might YouTube hows, we might
Yeah. Yeah.
Google
Yeah.
hows.
Yeah.
And but the book said, instead of going to how do I figure this out, it's who has already figured this out.
Mm.
Who could I talk to that's a mentor that's already further down the road than I am
Yeah.
in this particular
Yeah.
way?
Yeah.
And then you're talking to people, and it's relationships with people. And I think God does this purposely, even in the context of the church, when we're open enough, instead of trying to say, I'm going to figure this all out of myself, we're
Mhm.
saying, hey, I don't know what my next steps are. Now, to do that is sometimes a little bit, it could be a sense of embarrassment, like, oh, I don't have my whole life together. The truth is, none of us do.
Yeah.
And so to put this out there and saying, hey, I need some help, having conversations with people, those are the conversations that opens up doors. So to me, that's the seeking and knocking. I'm humble enough to go talk to
Yeah.
people, look for opportunities. And here's the thing: I've talked to a lot of people, and I realize, okay, that's a closed door. But at least now I know that's closed.
Right.
Let's move to the next spot.
Well, I mean, I think it's Acts 15, Paul's Mysia, Bithynia, closed door, closed door. And I mean, I in my book on transition, I make the statement a couple times: God is not a Walmart greeter. Here you go. No, there is that seeking. There is that exactly what you're saying. Back in the day, God doesn't steer a parked car. It's got to be moving.
Yes. Yeah, that's such a great analogy.
Yeah. So yeah,
So
man, no, I'm with you. So you're asking, you're there and then laying, okay, what does God have? What's in store for us? And where has God led you now?
yeah, and this just popped in my head, so I just thought I'd
Go
share
ahead.
it
No,
as
yeah.
well, and I'll get to where I am now. If somebody that may be listening in too, like, I just want to be clear, I was not always just like, all right, I'm going to pop this formula in, and I just feel really optimistic. I mean, there's times where I'm asking, seeking, knocking. Meanwhile, this asking is done in with just weeping, just like, I do not understand what God is doing. And I had experienced a lot of times where I just felt like God was silent. And I
Mm.
was like, I just don't know what he's doing. And one thing that really brought a lot of help to me, it didn't necessarily answer my questions, but it brought a lot of help to me. It was like, um, God did some of his biggest work in obviously in Jesus. And when Jesus was you know, in the garden, the Father, he prayed to the Father and there was silence. There was no apparent answer. And
Mm.
so Jesus experienced in a sense divine silence
That's
to the
good.
cross,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
even said, "My God, why are you forsaking me?" There was a lot of that angst, and what God was doing
Hmm.
through the Son of God was
Fantastic. Yeah.
purchasing our redemption. And I'm just thinking, like, hey, a lot of times that God is actually working in that silence too. It's not abandonment, but
Yeah.
we feel that way.
We
And
do.
I remember that abandonment is heightened though when you pray, seek, and the door is closed. Pray, seek, the door is closed. And I had a series where that continued to take place, and it was discouraging, and I
Mhm.
had to really work on managing back to, like, well, I can sit and soak and sour in this, or I can continue to, even in the midst of the turmoil of my heart, I could still say, you know what, I don't have to like wait till my heart is free. I can say, you know what, I'm still going to move. It's kind of one of those things like, if you don't do anything, you're going to feel bad. If
Mhm.
I do something, I probably will still feel bad, but at least I'm moving
At least
towards
you're moving. Yeah.
an answer, and I'm still operating in faith. So living by faith doesn't necessarily mean you always feel confident
That's great.
or
Man, that's so
feel, in a sense, feeling fully alive. Sometimes
yeah.
it's like, I'm living by faith, not by sight, and it's difficult, but I'm going to move towards the action. And I think the
It's
Lord really
fantastic.
blesses that action, and not in the necessarily in the ways that we would expect, like, oh, okay, now you're ready, an open door.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is the grind that
Hmm.
matures us more
Hmm.
than the open door itself.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, we can
But
stop the podcast right there. Part two coming up.
I appreciate that.
The
Yeah.
Sela. Just think on that for a little bit. That's so good, Jonathan. That's really good. So you're seeking, you're asking, you're working, and man, you don't know if it's church or ministry, and then what does God do for you? Where did you land?
Gotcha. So currently, and I'm actually in some sense still in that phase of asking, seeking, knocking. We never leave that phase, I guess, until, the new creation, I guess. But yes, for me right now, still, I had to pivot from church planning to, like, what am I going to do? I worked a series of jobs while I was trying to think, maybe apologetics. I had an opportunity of working at a mission board that just didn't seem to be the right fit. And so I just made the commitment, like, hey, I need to take care of my family. I need
Yeah.
to reach that stability.
Hmm.
And the thing that I've really come to terms with, when I was a young man, I was like aflamed with gospel passion, like, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to turn the world upside down. We're going to see a multiplication of churches.
Yeah.
And I don't think that passion is bad, but sometimes you can begin to drift to view yourself as the savior. I'm
Mm.
going to come in and save everything. I'm going to fix everything. And it's like,
Vindication.
actually, God doesn't need me to accomplish his mission. He wants to use me. And when he's ready, he will move me into mission.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I had to change in is that my whole identity was wrapped up in, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher of the gospel, I'm an evangelist or whatever it was at the time. And just to say, you know what, fundamentally, I'm a follower of Jesus, and ministry doesn't need to be compartmentalized to vocational ministry. Ministry is for a Christian is everything you do.
Yeah.
Everything you do should be in service to God and loving your neighbor, right? The two
Yeah.
great commands
Yeah.
the gospel should move us towards that. And
Yeah.
so I started re-envisioning saying, not only do I feel like this is a right time for me to step out of ministry to really focus just on my family and establishing myself, because for a long time I just felt like I was living in scarcity.
Yeah.
I was like, let's move to this space. And for those who are listening in, if you're like on the verge and you're just not sure, it's a great step. Obviously follow Jesus on where he wants you to go, but it's been a great step for me. And now my ministry is not as direct in the sense like with work with mind and body, which for those who are listening in, you're like, what is mind and body? It's fundamentally, it started off as a podcast, and then we launched an online coaching platform where it's a combination of like personal training, like nutrition coaching, fitness coaching, but also life coaching as well. We're talking about transitions, and I still have this side of me that I want to help people gain mental clarity and gain mental stability. But being in that space, I was like, hey, man, I get to serve people every single day, and I get to point people to where the ultimate end is. I don't know if you've heard this quote. It's by Irenaeus. He's the great 2nd century theologian. And it's one of my favorite quotes. He says, "The glory of God is man fully alive." And it kind of ties in with what Jesus said. Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life and life more abundantly," right? And so God's glory manifested in someone's life actually has the propensity, and what it does is it actually animates someone to where they have life and life more abundantly. And I'm thinking like, that's what I'm aiming for. Amen. Like everything in my life is from a God perspective, I'm trying to glorify God. From a man's perspective is I want you to feel fully alive. And if you think about this, whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian, if I asked you, do you want to feel fully alive? Who's going to say no to that?
Right.
And I think
how many guys out there are not. I mean,
right.
They're dragging themselves out of bed. They say they have no energy, and So that's right on. Yes.
And I thought whether I'm preaching or whether I'm helping somebody in the gym or helping them with their mental framework, I'm trying to help them, guide them towards feeling fully alive. And that's been kind of if you want to say, the North Star for me. And when I was able to see like, hey, the calling that I have hasn't really fundamentally changed. My assignment right now has changed. But I'm still moving towards this calling that I feel that God has on my life. And I plan on, even if I end up moving back into the pastorate, I plan on continue to build mind and body. It's something that I'm passionate about.
Absolutely.
And it's a great inroad to make connections with people as well. And so that's what I'm doing right now.
I mean, because that's a niche that it's just not out there today with Christians, and we need that. I think that we've got a whole generation of young men who need to be fully alive as men, and I think it's a great thing, Jonathan. So as we look at that, and God has got you serving in this role right now, as the guys are listening, and maybe some of them have been paying for Planet Fitness for like 14 months and have $140 in and have yet to sit on the machines or whatever. Why is exercise important? And it's just not, that's just Treg and Jonathan talking because that's their thing. It's not just a thing. Why is it so important for us, not only as men, but as fathers, as husbands, and as pastors in ministry?
So exercise is really the catalyst for your health and development. Now, somebody would say, well, wouldn't you say it would be like nutrition or sleep or something like that? Both of those are very fundamental and vital to your health as well.
Right.
See, when you exercise really hard, it's the catalyst for now I need to feed myself good food to help build my body up. If you only do nutrition and you only do sleep, you can be actually in pretty good, decent shape.
Right.
But you're not going to be fully in great shape unless you exercise. Exercise is the catalyst part. Okay. Then you feed it with good recovery mechanisms like nutrition and sleep. Those will help you recover. And then obviously there's that training element. And there's other disciplines that I would add to that, but these three are like these basic
Yeah.
fundamentals for health is
Yeah,
like,
I've watched some of your stuff and it'll probably be another podcast, but journaling, meditation, some of those things are very important too, as we look at it. But today, just focusing on this exercising. And I agree wholeheartedly. I can eat right, but still there's nothing like sleeping after a good workout. You've had a full day, you've had that full workout in, and man, your body, that's just awesome.
yeah, your body actually is now more sensitive towards nutrition. It synthesizes protein better.
Yeah,
And also, if you had a hard work out and everything, you worked your body out hard, you sleep better.
yeah,
So it all works in like this
yeah,
great, awesome rhythm. But a lot of times for pastors, they've developed a rhythm of life where they do very little exercise.
yes,
They do, it's a sedentary life, so they're sitting a lot. They do a lot of their appointments with people at a lunch appointment.
yeah.
And, you get that 5 pound burrito. Of course, it's not quite 5 pounds, but you do that 10 times a month.
Yeah,
You
man.
are going to be gaining weight if you're always eating that much food.
Absolutely. But it's Chipotle. Come on. It's got to be healthy, right?
That's right. That's right. Get the burrito bowl. There we
Yeah,
go.
there you go. Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
but there's the slow pace of life. You're not really exercising.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stress with ministry,
Yeah.
naturally, and then the tyranny of the urgent comes in, and it steals away your sleep. You're not sleeping well, then you're getting up. You're not
Yeah.
exercising. So a pastor's life, in the way that a lot of people end up doing it, they
Mhm.
create all the bad rhythms.
Yeah.
Like, and if you go back, I'm trying to think of what century it was. I'm not going to take a stab at what century, but at one point, pastors and the clergy were known for being some of the fittest people in culture.
Hmm.
But because of like recent events and the way that we do our new rhythms, pastors are known as actually some of the most undisciplined.
Yeah.
And obesity among pastors has risen in the last decade. Like, I think it's upward as 30%.
Man.
It's pretty insane. I was reading an article by Lifeway Research that basically relayed it was a pastor who was 490 pounds, and he just realized that he had a hard time ever talking about, dealing with sin or being,
Yeah.
gaining self-control
Yep.
when he was just, that grossly out of shape. And I'm not trying to be mean towards him. He was saying these words,
Oh,
and he
yeah.
said most pastors are teething their own grave, which means
Yeah.
they're eating their way to
Yeah.
death. And I think that it's a huge issue right now.
It is. I think too, Jonathan, we in the ministry, and I'm sure it's everybody, but this is just the world in which I live. We're busy. We're busy here, we're busy there, and well, I can't work out now. And then I think one of the problems too is it's scheduling where it's like I feel guilty if I'm not sitting in the office at 8 a.m. But the problem is all the guys that are at Planet Fitness at 5, I'm not at Planet Fitness at 5 because I'm still, meetings at school or I'm here. My schedule's just nonstop. And if we just allow that to take control, then our schedule is controlling our time, and people are controlling us, and we're not controlling our time.
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah.
And we've got to be on guard with that in ministry where, man, we've got to set that time. And you read the same guys I do. They talk about getting in your day timer and saying, nobody can fill this time because this is family time, or nobody can fill this time because this is my workout time. And how we miss that, and then say, well, I can't afford to take any time off. I can't afford to do that. And then you're going to end up so sick that you're going to get your time off, but not the way you want it,
Yes. Now,
because we do not take care of ourselves.
I think pastors have gotten a little bit more disciplined, but if I ask a pastor that's struggling, it's like, hey, do you mind if I like take a look at your calendar? And then some of them just don't really have a really clear defined calendar.
Yeah.
And it just tells me, and they may keep track of it in different ways, but it tells me that their ministry is that of reaction rather than being proactive. So reactive rather than being proactive.
There you
So
go. It's really good.
the truth is that people will come to you and they will come as if it's emergency. And what I found, and you can weigh into this, you've been in pastoral ministry much longer, but most people's emergencies aren't emergencies. Sometimes they are, but
Yeah.
most times they're not like immediate emergencies that you need to stop what you're doing. It's something like, hey, let's talk in a couple of hours. You have space for that in your calendar.
Right.
And I think, and one thing this does for people is it helps them to realize that the pastor is not a savior. But
That's
if we're
right.
not careful,
Mhm.
we can try to be people's functional saviors.
Mhm.
Their distress, and we need to teach them, one, to turn to the Lord
Yeah.
if it is a truly spiritual problem. That's not like we're not interested,
Yeah.
but that needs to be their first reaction. And then also, secondly, um, they need to know that you're a human being that has certain boundaries, that are set up. And I think being clear with those boundaries, and I know sometimes boundaries for some pastors may feel unspiritual or
Right.
unapproachable. Yes, certainly create space and be approachable,
Yeah.
but just be clear about those boundaries. And I love that pastors, they'll mark, not only time zones but energy zones, like
Yeah.
where they feel like they can best optimize their time.
Absolutely. And I think too, you got to tie in family with that. So like right now, my answer has continually been just let me get through basketball season. It's like nonstop. Just one more
Yep.
week. Let me get through the tournaments next week, and then man, we're good. And you have to have that. And you need to have those boundaries or you are going to kill yourself. So man, we're gonna have to, yeah, we're gonna do another one, Jonathan. So you guys are listening right now. You're gonna have information. I'm not stopping, but pause this podcast, look him up online, and schedule a consultation right now because I know some of you are thinking, I need this. I need someone to help me with my schedule. I feel like I'm getting ran over. How can they look you up? If they pause the podcast and look you up, Jonathan, where are they going to find you? What's your website?
Yeah. So a website is mindandbodystrength.com.
Okay.
And
And
we
you're on
have,
all social medias, right? TikTok, Instagram,
yeah. So
Facebook.
yeah, TikTok, Instagram is probably our two main,
Okay.
TikTok for the younger generation, of course, and
Yes.
Instagram. We're on Facebook too. So feel free to, like, if you find me there, you can just shoot me a direct message. You
Right.
can look us up on our website too and send a message as well.
Yeah, guys, do it and let Jonathan help you with your calendar, your schedule. And that's so, so important. I did a pastoral coach in 2020 before I knew what was going to happen, and it changed my life and ministry, really.
Mm.
And so I would encourage you to look in this route. So now, Jonathan, these guys are listening and they're not going to be one to call or they don't think they can call. How do they get started? Let's just say, man, I've got to start doing something, and something is better than nothing, obviously. Do we have time frames? Is it 30 minutes? Is it an hour? Is it 3 days a week of cardio, 2 days a week of strength? And I know each person is different, but let's just say somebody's listening and they just need something to hold on to. What's some recommendations you can give them?
So do I have time to give you five fundamentals real quick?
Dude,
Rapid
you got
fire.
all the time in the world. Yeah.
Okay.
The good
Um,
part is they can pause it and come back. So go ahead.
Here's five fundamentals that, regardless of what your goals are, these will fit for you. And we
Okay.
can get more specific if you want to dig here. So,
Yep.
principle number one is that of functionality. You want to think, okay, if I'm trying to get my body in shape, my body moves certain ways. So, you have push, pull, squat, hinge, and core. Every exercise that you can think of, like when it comes to like lifting, or even when it comes to even certain kind of cardio movements or plyometric movements, they're all involving or even a combination of push, pull, squat, hinge, or core.
Yeah.
You want to think, okay, I want to try to make sure in whatever way that I enjoy, I'm going to hit on all of those muscle groups so that I'm developing the best overall health for my body when it
Yeah.
comes to exercise.
Okay.
So that's just, now you can put that into a strength training regimen. You can put that into like, hey, I want to train all this, but I want to be really fast. I want to be athletic, or I want to be
Right.
better on the basketball court, or I want to be a bodybuilder. I'm just throwing this out there. But
Yeah.
you'll still need to think through, okay, here are the functionalities. I need to start with understanding movement.
Yeah.
Second thing is the principle of specificity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like when I ask people all the time, I go like, hey, what are your goals for fitness? And they're like, man, I like, maybe a young guy's like, man, I want to get as jacked as possible. Okay,
Yeah.
great. What are you doing? And their workout regimen is actually more for training for strength than it is muscle size. And I
Hmm.
realized, oh, they're their workouts are not like hitting the target of their goal.
Yeah.
They're lacking specificity.
Hmm.
And so you want to ask, okay, what is the main thing I'm trying to train? Now, if you're like some guys, you might say, I want to be bigger, stronger,
Yeah. Yeah.
faster. And you can list off all the modalities, right? I want to be the superhero man.
Yeah.
Okay. But you want to just probably pick like one and maybe a secondary modality. So let's
Yeah.
say I want to try to focus on muscle size, but I also want to get stronger too. Or you can flip that. I want to get
Yeah.
stronger, but I like to
Yeah.
get on some of
Yeah.
the muscle mass.
I took a picture of Roy McIlroy, hands crossed, and took it into my trainer. I'm like, this is who I want to be.
There you go.
All right, let's do it. But
Well, you got specific.
it
There you
was
go.
specific. Yes. When I'm standing on the golf course in my polo, I want to look like Rory. So
There you
that's
go.
what I did. Yeah. So just specific like that.
Yeah, getting specific. And now you know what the specific goal is.
Hmm.
Specificity would say, let's align the work that you do to hit that target.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, this is where a coach could come in because you may like, I don't know what work actually helps me hit the
Right.
target.
Right.
That's why you want to have somebody that can give you that
Yeah.
instruction, but you want to align the work you're doing with your goals. And I'm telling you, so many people don't do this right. And so that's a huge point.
Good.
And this is one thing that I do in an evaluation is helping people set up what is your goal? And I talk them through this is actually how you go about hitting that goal.
Good.
The third thing, once you have the right type of exercise, the regimen, maybe even the exercises,
Yeah.
it's the principle of comfortability. Now, when I say comfortability, I don't mean that it's going to be comfortable. Working out is hard, but
Yeah.
we want to figure out with your body, your biomechanics. Everyone's different. Like if I train somebody on a squat, not everyone. There's certain principles that everyone should do, but somebody that has just a kind of chases a bit. Somebody has really long legs and a short torso, or somebody has a longer torso, shorter distance between hip and knee. The way they descend into the squat is going to look different.
Hmm.
And sometimes you can get frustrated because you're looking at somebody's biomechanics that's different than you. And you're like, man, they do it like this, but I can't, I don't feel comfortable doing it that way.
Right.
And
Right.
what you need to learn is like, how do I actually get into the groove? And I'm doing this exercise appropriately. Sometimes really short people struggle with some of the machines because they're
Mhm.
made for a little bit
Absolutely.
taller.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
might just say, I can't use that machine. It doesn't fit my biomechanics very well. Doesn't mean it's a bad machine. It just means it doesn't work for
That's
you.
really
But
good. Yeah.
what you want to do is you want to figure out like, okay, what's actually working for me?
Hmm.
And a good way of stating it as well is like you want to figure out stimulus to fatigue ratios on things. Like
Yeah.
you want to have high stimulus, but if you have really high fatigue, you want to ask, well, is there a reason why I'm doing this? Like for instance, like really heavy deadlifts, those create a huge amount of fatigue. Now,
Yeah.
if you're a power lifter and you're like, I want to deadlift a lot, I'm like, well, that makes sense. The stimulus is good, but you need that fatigue because you're a power lifter. But if somebody was just trying to say, hey, I'm just trying to develop my lower back, then deadlifts may not be the exercise I choose for them if
Right.
they're just trying to develop the muscles themselves and not just, lift a crazy amount of weight. So
That's
we want
awesome.
to figure out like what makes sense, what's comfortable for that person.
Yep.
Fourth is the principle of consistency. And so you can get the functions down, have great specificity, know what works for you, you have comfortability. But if you're not consistent with it, no program, no diet works. You have to actually work the program. You have to do the work and be consistent. But when I say be consistent here, I want to go a little deeper. I don't just mean go to the gym and be there, every time that you have said you're going to be there. I mean, the way you do the exercises themselves are
Right.
consistent.
Okay.
So like, let's say you're doing bench press and somebody is like, they start off really good technique, slow eccentric, they pause, they have a good concentric part of the lift, and then they're getting tired. So first 5 reps were pretty good, but they want to get to 10 reps. So all of a sudden they begin to change their tempo of the lift. They begin to change their technique. They
Yeah.
last 2 inches before the bar hits their chest, they just kind of drop it and bounce it.
Bounce it.
And
Yeah.
see what happens there is like that is going to be very hard to track. You don't know if you're actually getting stronger because you're applying a different technique at different stages of the exercise.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
So you want to be consistent to the gym, you want to be consistent in the gym, and this allows you to measure things appropriately, which gets us to the last point, is the principle of scalability. When people do workouts, and I want to ask them, hey, do we have the ability to progressively overload this? If we can't, whether like if you're doing a speed modality, like overloading might be, hey, I run sprints and I run this many, so I'm adding volume, into that, or I'm adding speed in which I execute the thing. Now, if it's powerlifting, obviously you're trying to go up in weight each week is probably the main goal, but the goal is scalability. And so what I try to do with someone is we begin a workout regimen, and our goal is to continue to scale that all the way to the end. And then we want to overreach. I want to push you further than you've ever gone. And then you deload, which means you allow the fatigue that's built up both systemically and locally has built up in your body. You need to just allow that to de-escalate, where you fully recover, you heal. Then you start a workout regimen again. But this time the starting point is higher than the last one. But you're starting off at a relatively good point. You scale that up again, deload.
I think in marathon training, I think it's 4 weeks. You go 4 weeks up, and then you hit like a 14 miler, and then week 5, you scale way back. Yes. And your long run might be, 6 miles. But then week 7, you start way higher than you were. You're going to go 17 miler. And that's just, again, that scalability, and by being consistent and by doing this and specific in your training, it's amazing how you excel.
Right.
Your body adapts.
If you could get these 5 principles in and just say, okay, do I check these boxes? And you're on the right track. Now you might have to have somebody come in to help you analyze and ascertain what is specific to my goals. You might need a little trial and error when it comes to comfortability, and even learning consistency is good to have somebody to kind of help you with that and teaching you what good scalability looks like. Some young guys, you have a strong day and they're like, yeah, I feel so good, I'm going to add extra 50 pounds to whatever. And it's like, hey, that's actually not going to scale long term. You're actually messing up your next workout because you're not doing this with patience and skill. But if you dial this in, you can actually dial in not just your mesocycles, which is the short, like 12-week or 8-week programming. You can learn to actually schedule out your whole macro cycle, which is training for a whole year. Then we can get into this another time, but it's the principle of periodization, is where you learn to layer your modalities to where each of those modalities potentiate the next one. So I might do a season where I focus on muscle size to potentiate a strength training phase, which then could potentiate another modality or phase.
I love that. And that keeps you going. It switches things up, but just keeping you consistent. And overall, I think what we're talking about here, you're in the gym, you're exercising, and you just feel good.
Yes.
You feel good. And there's just nothing else that can do that or take that place. And let's face it, okay, did the Apostle Paul have a workout program? Man, the guy walked everywhere.
That's such a good point. I'm glad you brought that out, because some people say, developing a theology of fitness and health in the body is important here, because one of the things I think about why pastors don't engage in exercise and nutrition is sometimes there are extremes where people are over self-absorbed with how they look. There's body dysmorphia on different things. So there's a toxic form of being overly consumed with this. And also, you can just be unapproachable. You don't do anything social, and that can be a problem. Mm-hmm. I don't think that most pastors are there. Most pastors are maybe on the other set. But I think develop this theology of saying, first, in the first few pages of Genesis, God said that his physical creation was good. And I think a lot of pastors, equal, like they think of their body like they think of the earth. The earth is going to burn up someday. It has a time limit, so it's gone. My body's going to, be gone someday. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But if you look at the early pages of Genesis, we are specifically called to go subdue the earth. We're called to be good stewards. And there's passages that talk about self-control, even in First Timothy, which the context is magnifying the benefits of godliness. But he says, bodily exercise profits. It profits little. And most people say, well, see, it doesn't matter. No, it does profit in comparison to that which is spiritual. There's no comparison, but it is essential and it is an important part of life. But like what you said, though, I think is so important. In the culture that they lived in, they walked everywhere. Like the health crisis was not nearly as severe in that day. Now they had different health issues, diseases and stuff that we may not struggle with as much today, which I'm thankful for. But I think if you develop a good theology of the body, where the Gnostics would say the body is evil, the spirit is good, Christians said, no, the body is actually good. God has created it. It's something beautiful, and we should steward it. Yeah. And I think if we, as a Christian, we come from this perspective that we're supposed to steward everything that God has given us. And so not to is to be negligent.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I could go on and on and on.
No, that's great, Jonathan.
I should probably land the plane there.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's perfect. And so now, okay, I do think that, these guys that are listening, I hope that this will air. It might be a month or two out before we get to it, but you get some emails or you get some consultation calls. What can guys expect if they call you on the phone for a consultation, or they email you and set this up, or set it up through your website, Jonathan, for coaching? What's available to them? How can you help them?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, like if you want to set up a consultation, it's totally free. I'll give you free advice on what to do. I'll help you I'll help you with information. I'll point you to information that we've already done too, if you want some of those access to those things. So basically, I'm going to give you information for free to help you get started. If you want to implement that with a coach, I can, provide opportunities to coach you. You can enter into one of our coaching programs. Now, if you go to our website, you might look at the prices and be like intimidated by that. It's like, I can't do that. I'm an assistant pastor, or I don't have the financial resources for whatever reason. I'd be willing to work with you and in your budget. So just reach out and we'll try to figure out what would work best for you in your schedule. One thing that I haven't rolled this out. This is the first time I've talked about it. Yeah, I mentioned it to you a little bit, but I am looking to roll out a pastors group. I'm not sure where I'm going to host it yet. It might be like a Facebook group, but a group where pastors can join, and there'll be different things that people can join, like challenges. There will be information on nutrition. There'll be like a nutrition guide that we're putting together. There'll be programs that people can there'll be free programs, but also maybe even more advanced programs that people could buy. They'll have access to coaches. And if they want to do coaching, they can also, roll into a program like that. But it'll be a place of encouragement and community, because I've done a lot of study on this. A lot of people adhere to fitness and nutrition goals when they're in a community of people moving the same direction together.
We need our tribe, brother.
Yeah, so I'll let you know when I float this out.
I'm in. Absolutely.
But if you, one thing I'm trying to do is trying to say, how many pastors would be interested in this? If I could get 100 or so pastors that would say, hey, I would want to do something like this, I would be a part, then I think we'll organize that. Right now, I'm just kind of feeling it out.
My four on staff, 96.
Say that again?
I said all four of my guys are going to do it. So now just look for 96.
There you go. That's awesome.
All four of mine on. Yes.
Sweet. Yeah. That would be fun. I think it would be really neat. And sometimes a lot of pastors groups typically, and this is not a bad thing, can be about like theology and current trends and all that stuff. But that can add sometimes to stress, because it can slip into more of a debate.
It adds to my stress, because I'm like, how do these guys have all the time in the world to get on here and do this? It's like, man.
But the goal is to be in a context where here's everybody. We might have some different views, but we have the basic same framework of how we view the world. Yeah. And we want to try to optimize our our mental framework, our mental toughness, as well as our physical habits and abilities.
That's
And
awesome, man.
I
Well, if
think
you get that rolling even before we air this, just I'll know, and then we'll tag that information on as well.
yeah, that sounds great.
Description. Yeah, man, that's awesome. Jonathan, this has been fantastic, brother. Thank you so much. I was really hoping to only get to the mental aspects of it and the physical, but how you taught us a lot even before that with transition and trust in the Lord, and it's just been really good. And you've given us a lot to chew on. And I think, guys, if you're listening, I think as a spiritual coach, a pastoral coach, and a regular coach, Jonathan has a lot he could bring to help us with. And thank you, brother. Man, God's using you. How is William now? How's your son right now?
He's doing much better. I mean,
Good.
he's 6 years old. He's gotten much more stable. Uh, One of the reasons why we're moving back to Seattle is because he has some major surgeries coming up, like probably in
Okay.
another year, maybe a little longer, like
Okay.
jaw surgeries, kind of reconstructing some of this. And that's just going to be big. It's just going to
Yeah.
be huge surgeries.
Yeah.
And we want to be in Seattle where they're just more, the skill set is
Yeah.
more readily available for what he needs.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, we would appreciate your prayers
Oh,
on that
absolutely, bro.
journey. We're still just trying to get everything in line for us to make that move. But he's doing great, though.
Awesome.
Really, am
Awesome.
thankful for his communication. He communicates through sign language,
Okay.
and or he yells at us. Those two things. Not really, just yells. But he is so much fun. He's really the life of our family. Just
Yeah.
he's a gift.
That's awesome. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. All right, brother. Well, hey, thank you so much. And again, guys, you can hit the links below on the description and find out everything you need to do to help get your mind and body back where it needs to be. Jonathan, thank you again, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.